Excellencies, delegates, and participants for this event, a very warm welcome to all of you to this side event on action and for action on low carbon cities, new paradigms in energy efficiency, transport, and urban infrastructure. And it gives me immense pleasure to share that this webinar or this side event is a part of Urban Act webinar series. I am Dr. Ashita Sharma, Cities and Climate Change Technical Advisor at ESCAP, working with Urban Act Project. Urban Act Project is sponsored by German Climate Initiative, ICI, and is co-implemented by GIZ, USCLG ASPAC, ESCAP, and other knowledge partners. And for this side event, we express our deep gratitude to Government of India for co-hosting this event with us. India is also one of the pilot countries for Urban Act project, and it is our pleasure today that we have the delegation from India to share the insights and the strides made in India for low carbon development in the cities. And on this stage, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome our chief guest of the event, Madam DPR, Madam Deputy Permanent Representative from Government of India to ESCAP, Madam Paulami Tripathi. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. Thank you for sparing your valuable time. Also, I'm delighted to welcome the delegation from India, Mr. Savashish Das and Dr. Unmana Sarangi from Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Urban Affairs in India. Also, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Director from Center of IMTGT, Mr. Amri Bakhtiar. Thank you for joining us. Urban Act is also making collaborations with sub-regional bodies, and CIMT is one of them. It gives us pleasure to have you here. And it is, again, my pleasure to have the colleagues from ESCAP here, Mr. Michael Williamson and Ms. Catherine. Thank you for joining us. Both of them are Chief of Section in Energy and Transport Division, respectively. Thank you, all the participants who are joining us in line and in person in the room. It gives me pleasure to share that we have more than 200 registrations for this side event for today. And many of the participants are joining online, and there are several in this room, and it gives me immense pleasure. Without wasting much time, I here welcome Madam Paulami Tripathi for her opening remarks. Madam Tripathi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashita. Should I make my remarks from here or you want me to go there?
That's your choice. That would be okay.
Okay, then if not a problem, then I would like to make my remarks from here itself. Um, Esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all the participants who are here today as well as who are joining, I believe, online. Is this event online? Yeah, thank you. We are thankful that we are getting this opportunity to share our views on this event dedicated to one of the most relevant issues of our time, that is rapid urbanization that requires transition towards low carbon cities. In Government of India, through the Embassy of India in Bangkok, we are happy to be one of the co-sponsors of this event, and I like to thank all the other organizers who have taken this initiative to bring all of us together in this on this platform to share ideas. Urban centers are home to more than half of world's population, producing 80% of GDP and 75% of carbon emissions. This makes it essential for us to rethink how we design, build, and live in our cities. Latest research indicates that governments which invest in low carbon cities can enhance economic prosperity, make cities better places to live, and rapidly reduce carbon emissions. Low carbon cities are no longer perceived as costly propositions incompatible with development needs and aspirations. Right investments can build sustainable and livable cities and communities that will help us achieve both the SDGs and the objectives of the Paris Agreement. This understanding there is understanding now about the significant benefits that can be derived in areas such as public health, job creation, poverty alleviation from climate-friendly urban development, particularly in the global south. However, this does not mean that the challenges have been resolved. As per a recent estimate, implementing low carbon measures in cities globally would be worth almost US dollar 24 trillion by 2050, which will help us to reduce emissions from cities by 90%. To get there, we need full engagement of various stakeholders, including predictable financing and clean technology. This has brought renewed focus on the critical role of the national governments in achieving equitable and sustainable economic developments in the cities, and the role and responsibility of a range of actors engaged in urban governance at various levels, including the local level. Energy transition is critical in the urban context. There is an urgent need to invest in renewable energy sources at national levels and adopt energy efficiency measures and incentivize deployment of green technologies at global level. Equally important is the transformation of urban transportation. We must reimagine mobility systems by prioritizing public transport and leveraging smart technologies that can enhance traffic management, reduce congestion, and contribute to cleaner air while creating more connected and sustainable urban environment. Coming to the experience of India, India is dedicated to balancing rapid urbanization with its responsibility for environmental protection and climate action. Our strategy for tackling environmental challenges is closely woven into our development policies and initiatives. India's National Climate Action Strategy, unveiled by our Honorable Prime Minister at COP26, is built on five key commitments: achieving 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel energy capacity by 2030, meeting at least 50% of the energy needs through renewable sources by 2030, reducing projected carbon dioxide emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030, cutting the carbon intensity of the economy by 45% from 2005 levels by 2030, and reaching net zero emissions by 2070. A core aspect of India's development strategy is its commitment to transitioning to a low carbon economy. The vision is clearly outlined in India's nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. I am pleased to share that India has already met most of its targets from the first NDC ahead of schedule and has submitted its updated NDCs recently. The National Mission on Sustainable Habitat 2021-2030 plays a crucial role within India's National Action Plan on Climate Change. Its primary goal is to promote sustainability in urban areas, focusing on five key areas: energy efficiency and green buildings, urban planning with emphasis on green cover and biodiversity, mobility and air quality, water management, and waste management. By implementing innovative strategies in energy efficiency, transportation, and urban infrastructure planning, India is gradually reducing its carbon footprint emanating from the urban areas. There are many examples of leadership at local level from India, and I'm sure that my fellow panelists will share some of them. I just wanted to mention one example, which is from the Nagpur city in Maharashtra, with a population of just about 3 million. Nagpur is considered to be the geographical center of India, and the city has embarked on an ambitious journey by launching the Zero Carbon Building Action Plan. The plan includes a holistic roadmap covering public buildings, government-led affordable housing, commercial buildings as well as homes, and an implementation strategy to achieve net zero buildings by citywide by 2050. The roadmap further includes actions to help reduce GHG emissions in the context of choice of building material and how buildings are designed, built, and managed and deconstructed. At the global stage, India leads initiatives such as the International Solar Alliance and the Green Grids Initiative, infrastructure. The Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and Global Biofuel Alliance for benefit of our partners in Asia Pacific, among others. just wanted to, in conclusion, just wanted to emphasize that rapid urbanization that we are witnessing today offers both challenges and opportunities. The creation of low carbon cities is not just an environmental necessity, it is also an opportunity to redefine our urban landscapes for better. Together, we can develop innovative strategies, share better practices, and cultivate a global community committed to this cause. I hope that we all have very fruitful discussions today and we have some takeaways from this discussion. I thank once again everyone for your patience and listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights and giving the holistic view of the climate actions and low carbon initiatives taken in India, specifically in the urban domain. Taking this forward, I would like to invite the delegation from India. We have two representatives from India, one from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and another one from Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. I would invite both of them for their joint presentation to share the strides made in India in the domain of low carbon action in cities. Thank you. The floor is yours, Mr. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you. Can I run through the presentation, please? Okay. Thank you once again, and esteemed panelists and distinguished guests. The session was well started by Chair. It is a wholesome presentation of our country. So I am on behalf of the Government of India, representing Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and how actually we are moving towards zero carbon cities, or how we are going to achieve the NDC targets. Let me run you through the various steps and measures taken by Government of India in the last few years. Of course, cities are home to more than 50% of the global population and 70% of the emission. And India has been a very reluctant urbanizer for the last many years. But during the last 50 years, the urbanization has been very fast, you know. So we are expecting that the carbon emission, if business as usual scenario continues, it will be touching around 4.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide emission by 2030. But in view of the NDC targets and in order to achieve various sustainable development goals, Government of India being a federal structure, Ministry proposes various set of guidelines, then regulatory framework, and capacity building programs, and through various mission-oriented development for the urban local bodies. The urban local bodies are at the core of implementing strategies for like town committees, municipal committees, and municipal corporations. So our strategy has been to, next slide please. It has been a threefold strategy. Next slide. The million plus cities, 100 cities, we have started with the smart city scheme, and some Amrut cities were there. It is Atal Mission for Renewable of Urban Transformation. We have targeted around 500 cities in the first phase, and in all together, all the 4,800 odd cities, we have implemented Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, that is a affordable housing program, and PM Sonidhi is for the street vendors, and National Urban Livelihood Missions, catering to the livelihood needs of the people. So this threefold strategy has been adopted by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which is, when all these schemes are linked up with reducing the carbon footprints or achieving SDGs. Next slide, please. The 100 smart cities missions, they are basically developing unique and crucial solutions to key sectors like energy, building, mobility, and waste management by integrating climate change in urban planning. Just to give a few glimpses, we have installed more than 100 megawatt solar power capacity in 100 smart cities. Then a lot of green spaces were developed. More than 1,104 green spaces were developed in various cities. Water bodies were restored. Some 9 square kilometers of water bodies were restored. This scheme was launched in 2015, and we are almost nearing the end to the scheme. Next slide, please. Atal Mission for Renewable and Urban Transportation, Transformation. This scheme is mostly for universal coverage of drinking water supply in all the statutory towns and 100% sewage and septage management. This mission, this is the broad mission objectives. Apart from that, some inbuilt innovative structures like issue of municipal bonds, green bonds, then ease of doing business in construction permits. Those kind of elements are also inbuilt. In this scheme, we have actually developed a lot of GIS-based master planning for tier 3 cities, small cities, which was not there initially. Next. In Swachh Bharat mission, this is three main component. That is, one is solid waste management. Next is behavioral change and wastewater treatment. So through this scheme, we have covered almost all the wards, municipal wards of the cities across the country. And next. So these are some of the, I will be leaving behind this presentation so that you can go through the figures. I'm not going through the figures. Next. Building, this is one of the most important sector because construction and construction sector is going to be the main source of greenhouse gas emissions in next coming few decades. And when our almost 50% of our housing stock is yet to be built, so this is one of the challenges that we are facing. This is challenge as well as opportunity for us. Next slide, please. So we have launched a very ambitious housing program, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which has sanctioned almost 11.8 million houses were sanctioned. Out of them, some 8.7 million houses were completed. And 2.8 million houses are under construction, various stage of construction. These are mainly, these are affordable housing schemes aimed towards economically weaker section of people and middle income group people. Within this affordable housing mission, we have an inbuilt technology submission, which actually talks about where we have shortlisted some 6 technologies which are alternative technology, modern, resilient, disaster resilient with low carbon footprints, and some 1,000 units each in 6 cities of different climatic zone. 6 cities we have built some lighthouse. We call them lighthouse projects. These lighthouse projects, to sum up in a very single sentence, the cementitious material that is being used in this building has been reduced to some 30-35%. We are using fly ash, silica fume, and granulated blast furnace slag. Those kind of cementitious material is being used. GIZ has been our partner in monitoring the thermal efficiency of these buildings. So there is substantial reports coming up where the thermal efficiency of these buildings have been increased. In order to dissipate the learnings from these lighthouse projects, we are running various certificate course for the construction workers as well as the urban planners, and then we have also identified various indigenous technologies which are actually put through a incubation through various engineering colleges, so that they can be, that is what is, you can say, the focus, one of the focus agenda of even ESCAP meeting, that is localization of technologies. And these SOPs of alternative technologies are built into our schedule of rates of our construction agency, that is CPWD. Next. Then in terms of urban transport, the policy came in 2017, Urban Transport Metro Policy. So we have implemented this entire scheme in 27 cities, and we are going ahead with other metropolitan cities as well. Next. So to sum up, we have covered mostly all these SDG goals, and through these schemes, we are providing regulatory framework, financial support, capacity building to the urban local bodies to attain these various SDGs. Thank you.
Yeah, myself, Dr. Sarangi from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Just I would like to say, respected Deputy PR, Mission, Government of India, senior officers, distinguished panelists on the dais, officers from the UN ESCAP, my colleagues, directors from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, my dear participants. It's my pleasure to just highlight certain key points and features with regards to low carbon emissions and the LT-LEDs model developed by Government of India, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, as per the national circumstances and as envisaged in the UN CCC Paris Agreement. My presentation covers 4 aspects: India's contribution to global warming, India's energy needs for development, India's long-term low-emission development LT-LEDs model, initiatives for low-emission development and climate resilience, and finally, global partnership to achieve the climate goals, especially with reference to the global partnership SDG 17, which talks of the global partnerships. To start with regards to India's contribution to global warming, initially I want to highlight that India is a fast-track developing economy having resources, scope and opportunities and the aspirations to become a developed economy by the turn of 2047 as per the Atmanirbhar Bharat, despite several challenges and constraints. India's per capita annual emissions is 1/3 of the global average. India's historical contribution to cumulative global GHG emissions is minuscule despite having a share of approximately 17% of the world's population. In this regard, I would like to highlight that the historical emissions have been there with respect to the developed counterparts until they cooperate with the developing countries, including the global south and that to India, we would not be able to achieve the net zero. It would be a very, very difficult task for us to achieve the net zero. Though we are aspiring for it, we are thinking in terms of climate finance, we are thinking in terms of transfer of technology, we are thinking in terms of capacity building. This is a great challenge for the country, but we are aspiring and working for it with a lot of networking and global partnerships. From a global carbon equity perspective, developed countries need to undertake nearly net zero well before 2050. Coming to the energy needs of the country, energy is essential for erasing India's development deficits and meeting its development needs and aspirations. India's per capita electricity consumption was 1255 kWh in 21-22, which is around 1/3 of the global average of per capita electricity consumption. India is world's 3rd largest consumer of oil, 3rd largest LPG consumer, 4th largest LNG importer, and 4th largest refiner. India is likely to account for 25% of global energy demand growth over the next 2 decades. So this is really the aspiration and the achievement of India, which they are planning for the net zero. We need to achieve all these targets as the time passes by. The LT-LED model has been submitted by Government of India on 14th November 2022 by the ministry in UNFCCC as per the Paris Agreement, and that document talks of achieving low carbon emissions and low greenhouse gas emissions. This is directly linked to development of the urban sector, urban housing planning, smart cities development, and there are various schemes of Government of India which are linked to this, which are linked to achieving the low carbon emissions. Without low carbon emissions, we cannot eliminate the emissions in the large infrastructure industries like steel, aluminum, and cement sectors, which are called the hard to abate sectors. The strategy elaborates on the transition path from fossil fuels to more sustainable energy sources, the expansion of green hydrogen production, increasing electrolyzer manufacturing capacity, and enhancing nuclear power capacity are some of the milestones envisaged under the strategy. Low carbon development of transport sector is also pegged on the increased use of biofuels. Coming to the achievements, India has set itself under the NDCs to reduce the emission intensity of GDP by 45% below 2005 levels by 2030. India's net zero target is 2070. India has introduced National Action Plan on Climate Change, State Action Plans on Climate Change, and as per national distributed contributions. And these action plans are implemented at the state levels, subnational levels, and to the extent it is coordinated with the local levels also. There is a Mission Life movement which has been announced by the Honorable PM in COP26, during the Glasgow meet, and it is a non-quantitative target, and it is basically a multilateral stakeholdership approach wherein we need to change our lifestyles with regard to environment. Then only we can achieve the climate goals and all the related goals which are relating to environment. So this it has got a 7-point action plan, and those action plan are being followed, are being achieved subsequently. And if you go by the action plans, these sectors are the 7 themes of the mission life are: save energy, save water, say no to single-use plastics, adopt sustainable lifestyle, reduce waste, adopt healthy lifestyles, and reduce e-waste. India's efforts have been overwhelmingly undertaken with its own resources. We are very much cautious about our resource. We need to develop our resource. We need to tap our resource. Development of an integrated, efficient, inclusive, low carbon transport system, 20% ethanol blending we need to achieve in petrol by 2025, comprehensive package for electric vehicles, including domestic manufacturing, auto parts, batteries, investments in charging infrastructure, and demand aggregation. We need to achieve net zero by 2030 in respect of the Indian railways to an annual mitigation of 60 million tons of CO2. National plan for multimodal connectivity as per PM Gati Shakti is there. Integrated and optimal freight networks, transit-oriented networks as the Bharatmala, Sagarmala, and dedicated freight corridors. Then India's national logistic policy aspires to reduce cost of logistics in India to be comparable to global benchmarks by 2030. Coming to the global partnerships, International Solar Alliance launched by India and France for cooperation between governments, multilateral organizations, industries to strengthen the global cooperation on solar energy. CDRI, a partnership of national governments, UN agencies, multilateral development banks, private sectors, knowledge institutions to promote the resilience of new and existing infrastructure systems to growing climate risks and disasters. India-UN Development Partnership Fund set up to contribute to developing countries' efforts to realize the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, including climate action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir, for sharing the valuable insights and the efforts India is making. Definitely, India is amongst one of the largest emitter, as well as having the large urban population. So efforts made in India would definitely add to the global attainment. Thank you for sharing your insights. Now moving to the other sub-region here, that is IMTGT, Indonesia, Malaysia Growth Triangle. We have Director Amri Bakhtiar amongst us from CIMT, and Urban Act in collaboration with CIMT is making strides in the sub-region in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, and is supporting the project developing the bankable projects in the sub-region. And here I would like to invite Mr. Bakhtiar for his valuable insights and the efforts CIMT is making in terms of achieving low carbon development in the region. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shita, for the kind introduction. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Amri Bhatia, as mentioned by Shita, Director for Center for Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle Sub-Regional Cooperation. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we are easily referred to as CIMT for your easy reference. So today I'll talk about some of the work that we do, especially in some of the action for low carbon cities. Next, please. Allow me to introduce our organization for those that may not be familiar. So the IMTGT sub-region was established in 1993, more than 30 years ago, within the sub-regions of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. We cover 35 provinces within the sub-region, so it's not the entire country, as most people assume. So it's within Sumatra Island and Riau Islands within Indonesia, southern Thailand, as well as Peninsular Malaysia. So we cover some parts of the 3 countries. Next, please. So within the institution setup of IMTGT, we have a leaders summit, which will next be held during Malaysia's chairmanship of ASEAN during the summit in the first quarter of 2025. We also have a ministerial level meeting where we engage with the 3 ministries or agencies in charge of economic development within the 3 countries. So particularly on the work that we do on sustainable cities, we have a forum called the IMTGT Chief Ministers and Governors Forum, CMGF, which provides a platform for provincial governments within the 3 countries to converge and discuss on a number of issues, but particularly for on sustainable efforts and green action, we have what we call the Green Council, which consists of mayors of the particular provincial leaders and state government of the three countries, of which then we have the Green Cities Mayors Council, which consists of the mayors of the towns and cities which we have under the sub-region. So with regards to, as in many other parts of the world, the MTGT sub-region is also experiencing rapid urbanization, with 13 of its cities projected to have populations exceeding 1 million within the next 10 years. And when you talk about the MTGT sub-region, it's mainly, these are secondary and tertiary cities. These are not your Jakarta, Bangkok, and Kuala Lumpur. These are outside the normal growth areas. And still, of course, we see urban, rapid urban development within the sub-region. So as the MTGT region continues to experience rapid economic growth, adopting low carbon strategies is essential for balancing development with environmental protection. So cities like Melaka and Hat Yai are already taking steps towards sustainability through solid waste management initiatives and greenhouse gas inventory process, supporting the transition to a low carbon future. With over 296 cities, municipalities, districts, and towns in the MTGT sub-region, implementing low carbon development strategies will have a broad and lasting impact on reducing emissions and promoting long-term sustainability across the sub-region. Next, please. So with that in mind, we have prioritized sustainability through our Green Cities initiative, emphasizing environmental resilience, low carbon growth, and improving living standards in the urban areas within the sub-region. So overall, we have the long-term strategy, which is the Vision 2036, which is a 20-year plan established in 2016, which lays out the foundation for all the work that we do within the MTGT framework. Under that, we have the Sustainable Urban Development Framework, SUDF, which was formulated and guides some of the work, particularly within the provincial and the state government. So currently, there are 42 green cities in MGT that are working on implementing initiatives under 7 green cities portfolios, as we refer to. So those 7 portfolios are on biodiversity, carbon literacy, circular economy, education for sustainable development, energy, solid waste management, as well as transportation. So some other initiatives that we do to accelerate the implementation of the MTGT urban development, including the formulation of Green City Action Plans, or GCAP. Some of you may be familiar with that. That is a work that we do with the Asian Development Bank, and currently Malaysia is currently developing GCAP for 14 cities, and previously we had Melaka, Songkhla, Hat Yai, Batam, as well as Medan as previous cities that we work closely in phase 1 of our GCAP implementation. So in addition, we also have the MTGT Green Cities initiatives and Integrated Green Urban Transport Plan, which has been assisted by ADB, where we work on assisting 6 cities within our sub-region, which is Banda Aceh, Pekanbaru, Langkawi, Penang, Krabi, as well as Phuket. Next slide, please. So in terms of the guiding framework and plan towards a sustainable and resilient sub-region, so the SUDF is a key framework for promoting sustainable development across the cities within our sub-region. So it serves as a strategic guide to help member cities implement environmentally sustainable, inclusive, and resilient urban policies. So it's structured around the 7 areas which I mentioned previously. So in phase 1, which we have just concluded this year, the SUDF lays the groundwork for cross-city collaboration, and phase 2, which is under development, aims to deepen cooperation through more structured coordination between cities, especially by engaging what we call lead portfolios or lead cities, and tracking the progress of key projects. The lead portfolios will play a critical role in coordinating efforts and ensuring the success of key initiatives across the 7 portfolios that I have just mentioned. So GCAP assists us in this measure with regards to designing and supporting MTGT cities in their journey towards sustainable and low carbon development. So it serves as an important guide for cities to develop sustainable and resilient cities by implementing practical actions that contribute to green growth, climate resilience, and improve urban environment. So among the key aspects of the GCAP includes emission reduction, sustainable transportation, urban planning, infrastructure development, as well as community engagement. Next, please. So we track the implementation of the SUDF. So as I mentioned, phase one is completed this year. So as you can see from the colors in the screen, 6 out of the 15 targets were achieved, which is, not to our expectation. Of course, I think clearly more work needs to be done with regards to the long-term plan in achieving some of our targets with in this area. So the 6 targets that were achieved were regards to in our transportation space, with regards to electric vehicles, both private cars as well as buses. In terms of the energy sector, on energy efficiency buildings, as well as energy produced for under solar PVs. Also for greenhouse GHG emission inventory, which was achieved, as well as solid waste management in terms of the composting plants, which were established. So currently, we are working towards accelerating the implementation of SUDF Phase 2 for the SUDF Action Plan. We intend to focus on the implementation and achievements for targets especially those with low progress as indicated in red. So I think clearly there's a lot of learning from the past 5 years with regards to how we implement the SUDF, and clearly, support is required, and I think some of the learnings allow me to share with regards to the challenges that cities face. Next, please. So I think, of course, I think this is something that I hear a lot, and something not also is also common within our sub-region is limited financial resources. Of course, that's an area where we always require help. So this has, hindered government from adopting green technologies. But in addition, it's also important to highlight that there's also bureaucratic inefficiencies, which we see in some of the implementation. So where there is support provided, because of the nature of how, especially local governments and federal governments operate, there's sometimes this leads to delays, as well as, some hindrance with regards to how we want to implement some of those projects. And of course, misalignment of priorities and needs on financing. I think there clearly needs a match between what donors can provide and the needs of the cities. Many times we encounter conditions where, cities have different priorities, and this doesn't sometimes align with what the resource which is available for them to tap into. So I think more engagement needs to be done with regards to making sure this alignment is achieved. Secondly, with regards to geographical challenges, so climate change presents a range of geographical challenges to the sub-region, such as vulnerability to sea level rise and extreme weather events. This increases the risk to infrastructure and communities, but also makes it harder to implement sustainable solutions like renewable energy systems and resilient urban planning. So clearly, when the need for adaptation to changing environments, this can divert resources away from emissions reduction. So this complicates transition to low carbon development, when the focus is more on dealing with what problems they are facing now. For example, flood mitigation efforts, in terms of the air quality. So you don't look at the long-term strategy and vision, which in a way can save a lot of costs for some of these cities. And finally, the lack of technical capacity, so limited technical capacity at the local level to develop and implement effective mitigation and adaptation strategies. So this lack of understanding also hinders buy-in to pursue low carbon initiatives. So I think what is the most, because we have cities around here, especially from India. Yesterday we had a great discussion where we heard from some of the cities there. I think what we need to preach is to those that are not in the room, those who are not in the discussion, because where we face a lot of difficulties is where there's a limited buy-in, especially at the leadership level of these cities and some of them at the provincial level. So if we can overcome this, certainly that can really facilitate some of the implementation as well as achievements of some of the targets that we wish to achieve. So some potential solutions we like to share in terms of collaborative solutions. So first, to strengthen partnerships and dialogue with development partners and potential donors to access funding and resources, especially at the regional level. Being at the sub-regional level, sometimes we are not seen, and I think that's why we want to highlight and showcase some of the work that we do. Of course, at the ASEAN level, at the regional level, there's a lot of funding available, so it's how to manage those at the regional level and to make it more in line with what is required at the local level. I think that is the challenge. Secondly, is to explore a public-private partnership mechanism to finance low-carbon projects or initiatives. I think there's a need to allow an enabling environment for startups, social enterprises to thrive in this space. So I think it's important that the private sector needs to take on some of the work where, I mean, mainly for the sub-region, we see this is mainly driven by government. So I think we need to shift away from the reliance on government to, to include the private sector where there's a lot of opportunities and business for them to leverage on. And finally, to strengthen collaboration between cities in IMTGT as well as beyond the sub-region to unify some of the actions. So this involves cross-sector engagements, because we feel that sometimes where there's a misalignment between the cities and the federal government, that also can complicate some of the work that we do. So in having more dialogue and inclusivity in some of the dialogue that we have across all the, the levels of government as well as cross ministries, I think that can really help in implementing some of the work that we do. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bakhtiar. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And it's indeed, there is a gap between the projects or the bankable projects and the financiers. And this is where Urban Act and CIMT collaboration or any such collaboration can play a role. And very well highlighted that we need to tap the public-private partnerships to enhance more finances and to get the climate finance available for the cities. And the two major sectors where the city infrastructure plays a key role is energy and transport. So taking this discussion further, I would like to welcome Mr. Michael Williamson. He's the chief of the section in the energy division at ESCAP, and he'll share with us the new paradigms in the energy sector with respect to the urban domain. Thank you, sir. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Ashita ji. And first of all, let me express my thanks to the Government of India for co-hosting this dialogue with ESCAP, especially to Ms. Tripathi, who kicked off our discussion very nicely, and to the two directors who have come across from India. So Director Saringi and Director Das, really appreciate you sharing all of those great examples with us. So the topic of my talk is really driving the energy transition in cities. And it strikes me that we have two big challenges ahead of us in Asia Pacific. How do we guide the energy transition, so the move to sustainable energy throughout this century? And secondly, how do we ensure sustainable urban development? We're going to have 600 million new people living in cities. How do we make sure that they live there as sustainably as possible? Next slide, thanks. So just a little bit about the energy division. So we're the smallest division in ESCAP, but not the least important. I think we're very important because this issue of energy is cross-cutting. So we work in two main areas, sustainable energy development, which revolves around the SDG 7 targets and a lot of subsidiary efforts that we're doing, everything from the phase down of coal to sustainable cooling. And then the second section, which is on regional energy connectivity, about how do we integrate the region's power systems, as well as manage the issue of critical raw materials. So that's just a snapshot of our division. Next slide, please. So let's start to think about cities and the energy transition. And I think, this is almost like a PhD thesis for somebody if you want to write one. It's not something we can easily cover in 7 minutes. But let's make a start. I think we all agree cities are the focus for energy demand. We have transport, we have buildings, we have services, we have manufacturing. So this is where most of the global energy is going, into these black boxes we call cities, and that's where most of the greenhouse gas is coming out. So we have energy coming in, greenhouse gas coming out, but also GDP coming out as well, because cities are the engines of the economy. And if we think about energy, we don't, if we look at the supply side, we don't have a huge number of opportunities. Yes, we can do solar, we can do other sorts of energy, but I'm really talking about the gigawatt scale. We're not going to do energy generation at the megawatt or gigawatt scale in cities. So really the principal leverage is how we use energy. So how do cities use energy? These very complex systems of people and infrastructure and technology, this is the big leverage. But the point that I want to make is that sustainable energy cities are not alien foreign places to live. I think they're great places to live. So as we move along the track of more sustainable energy, we're also moving along a parallel track of more livable, more competitive cities. Because this idea of competition in cities is important. People want, mayors of cities, they want people to move there. They want industries to locate their universities. So cities are actually in competition. And one of those competitive factors is how good is your public transport? How clean is your air? How easy it is to move around? And all of these things line up with sustainable energy almost magically. When we talk about public transport, electrification of public vehicles, clean air, urban forest, we're talking about buildings which are comfortable to live in. All of these things are also very good for sustainable urban living environments. Next slide. So if we think about our big challenges in sustainable energy, and this is what keeps me awake at night and my boss Hong Peng awake at night, who's sitting at the back of the room, we have to upgrade energy efficiency, we have to move away from fossil fuel energy towards renewable energy, and lastly, we have to bring modern energy, which is clean cooking and electricity to everybody. This is the basic challenge set down in SDG 7. But if we think about the urban environment, there are trends that will derail this. So inefficient buildings. I mentioned these 600 million people. If they move into poorly insulated buildings, poorly solar designed buildings, this is going to be very, very negative. In terms of this transport system, Catherine's going to talk about this in detail afterwards, but the public transport systems, and particularly public transport planning, is really important. And then, of course, urban planning. Are you going to put people in these dormitory suburbs where they wake up at 5 in the morning, drive a long way to their destination and reverse the process at night, which will consume many, many gigatons of fossil fuel? This is not what we want. So these are some of the urban trends that we need to keep an eye on. Next slide. So this really brings me to the point of energy efficiency. And when we talk about clean energy to colleagues, everybody talks about renewables. They talk about solar and wind, a bit less on energy efficiency. But we won't get to the Paris Agreement targets without energy efficiency, which is why it's called a hidden fuel. And the story of energy efficiency in our region is that under the SDG 7 goal, every year we have to get 2.6% more efficient. And in fact, we did well in the first part of the last decade, and then things have started to slow down. So we really need to pick up speed on this objective, and that's where cities come in enormously. Next slide, please. So turning to the second part of cities and the energy transition, we have two ways of looking at this problem. Now, in a certain sense, two things can be true at the same time. The first is cities are the problem, and I'm sorry if I'm being provocative here, but the second is that cities are the solution. And I think it's that second part that we're all committed to work together on. If we take the view that cities are the problem, we can point to runaway urbanization, unplanned development, carbon-intensive urban form, and a range of other things. But in terms of solutions, there are a plethora of solutions, and I think that this move of rural to urban, which we're seeing in the Asia Pacific, can be a very positive model of low carbon living. You can actually get better, more economical, more economies of scale, better sustainable solutions in the urban environment than in other environments. I think also mayors and city authorities are quite on board with this message. We see a huge groundswell of action from this group. They're very committed to climate, to sustainable urban development. And if we think about greenfield developments, as we develop new infrastructure, new technologies, new solutions, these greenfield opportunities are great ones to implement that. We don't need to implement the old technologies. We can leapfrog to the best and the newest technologies in terms of building fabric, of transport networks, in terms of electromobility and others. So let me just turn to the next slide if I can. This is my second last slide. I promise I'll be very fast. If we look at a range of hypothetical solutions across the board in terms of energy solutions, and we divide them into supply side, demand side, and behavior and system changes, all of those ones in red, and I'm not going to read them out, these are ones that are related to cities. So in fact, if you're sitting there in a city and looking at how can I change the dial on sustainable energy, there's a plethora of opportunities, everything from battery storage, green buildings, electrification of heating, the whole electrification of transport, but also a lot of the systems changes. How do you incentivize changes to low carbon behavior? Transport choices, do you work from home? Can you digitize services? Can you digitize commerce and ensure the circularity of materials? So many of these sit within the framework of cities. So next slide, please. And so this is just for your humble, my humble suggestion for your consideration of some entry points about how to realize the energy transition in the urban context. First of all, urban planning needs to think about climate, it needs to think about carbon budgets and energy. All of these things need to be built in by systems approaches. As human beings, we're very poor in doing systems thinking because from school, we're trained to be specialists. We emerge and work in specialists and think about our silo and think about what we know. We think less about the other systems, those gears that intermesh with what we're doing, and how do we come up with joined up solutions. Secondly, building energy performance codes need a lot of work, particularly on energy performance and particularly for cooling. This is something which is to some extent absent in our region. The third point is we all love electric cars. Everybody would love to jump into Tesla, but that shouldn't be at the expense of electrifying public transport, which is the cheapest and the best way to decarbonize. The fourth point is fiscal incentives. So wherever city authorities have their hands on fiscal levers, they should be used to the maximum to build better vehicles, better buildings, to ensure people take energy efficient choices in their daily lives. And the fifth point is that in cities you find very large consumers of electricity. You find authorities that own multiple buildings, that run public transport systems. Those entities can actually buy their electricity from renewables projects directly. So through the electricity grid, they can contract and purchase renewable energy, and they can tell people our trains, our trams, our electric buses are running on renewables. This is a really important step. And the last point, and this comes home to ESCAP, is that we're all not alone in this journey. There are multiple opportunities for sharing of the best practices. ESCAP, Kurt and Omar and their colleagues, Philip, are doing excellent work to bring all of these stakeholders together. So let's share our experience. Let's talk about financing. Let's talk about technology in going through some of these very complex situations and solutions. So that's where I'll end it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you. And indeed, cities are the problem and cities are the solution. And with that note, moving to the other sector of the city and transporting from one side of the panel to the other side of the panel, I invite Ms. Catherine. Apologies for getting you there, but Ms. Catherine is a chief of section from the transport division at ESCAP, and she'll be sharing the insights with respect to new paradigms in the transport with reference to the urban context. Ms. Catherine, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the kind introduction, Your Excellency, Ms. Tripathi, fellow esteemed panelists, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from the far corner of the room. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I believe Michael has already covered half my presentation, so thank you very much. If you ever consider a role in the transport division, you know where to find us. So why are we talking about transport in this context? We have heard from the other panelists continuing urbanization, ambitious housing programs, especially from my colleagues here from India. So the question, of course, how do we move all these people through the city while avoiding the well-known negative externalities of transport? And that is congestion, air pollution, noise pollution, and a number of other challenges. So if I can have my next slide, please. And we skip that in the interest of time. The next one, please. So transport plays a key role in limiting global warming. If I want to be a little bit more provocative, without successful decarbonization of the transport sector, there can be no success in the Agenda 2030, and there can be no success in the delivery of the commitments of the Paris Agreement. Globally, almost every fourth ton of greenhouse gas emissions comes from the transport sector, and for those global emissions, more than 40% are produced in our region. So the Asia Pacific region plays a key role in achieving overall decarbonization. And we see projections that say by 2050, transport-related emissions will increase by another almost 50%, which is not a surprise because transport fuels and powers economic growth and development, which we all want. So where do all these emissions come from? And if I can have the next slide, please. Should come as no surprise to anybody that they come from passenger transport on the road. Mostly from individual transport, which represents about 70% of the vehicles on the roads in Asia Pacific and continues to grow. 90% of that road-based transport is still powered by fossil fuels. And private vehicle ownership in the region, you can see it here, is growing very strongly, almost 10% over 5 years. And yet it is still only at about 60% of the levels we see in the developed world. So there is significant potential for growth. So if we do not manage to transition away from fossil fuel-based individual road transport, we have no chance in achieving our climate commitments. So I would recommend, or our work shows, we need a double shift. One is the modal shift to public transport, which includes metros, LRT, bus rapid transit. And the other one is the one that my colleague from the Energy Division has mentioned multiple times, is the shift to electric mobility. So let's talk about these two shifts a little bit. Let's start with urban transit. And if I can have my next slide, please. Thank you very much. So in many major cities in the region, we already see public transit systems in operation successfully. Many have been around for many years. However, these systems getting old, they need to be upgraded and they need to be more efficient because, yes, they do compete with individual private transport. It is still a status symbol of wealth and development. It is convenient. So if you can afford it, you will buy a private car, and it is not at all attractive to take public transport per se. So that is something that governments need to change. We heard, for instance, in the presentation from India, another 1,000 kilometers of metro to be built, transit-oriented development to be emphasized. These are exactly the right measures. Indian Railways commitment, I was pleased to hear net zero by 2030. Congratulations. I think that's an excellent target. And so I think that can stand as an example for other governments. Unfortunately, we can see the opposite trend. You see on the right-hand side, infrastructure investments by mode. You can see 60% of all investment goes still to road to this day, which is not at all the right approach. Can we move on to electric mobility, which is the second shift we want to look at? I think the importance of electric mobility for achieving climate objectives has been recognized globally. You can see here some numbers from the International Energy Agency and from the IPCC, where we're saying we want 20% of existing fleets on the road to be electric in 2030. Mind you, that is 6 years away. That's a very short time frame. And we want 60% of global EVs, of global vehicle sales to be electric by 2050. At the moment, the share of electric vehicles in new vehicles sold is under 20% worldwide. And if I take some numbers from the region, China is just under 40% of all new sales, so it's on a very strong trajectory. Thailand is in 23 at about 10%, which is impressive given that overall vehicle sales have fallen. We have seen in the presentation from Mr. Bakhtiar that targets in Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia for electric mobility have been achieved. So that's actually quite encouraging. So if I can have my next slide, what needs to happen to bring all of this together? I think it was very intelligent from the organizers to call this event the combination of urban infrastructure planning, energy, and transport. So I think that's exactly where this integration needs to happen. Transit-oriented development needs to be promoted. We've heard from Michael about sustainable energy solutions. We've heard from Dr. Sarangi about transport, increasing the use of biofuels. We need to leverage the power of digitalization. Smart cities and smart infrastructure allows us to use existing infrastructure more efficiently. And of course, we need to build on inclusive and multimodal transport networks. It cannot be just a competition between the private car and public transport. We have last mile problems to solve. We have to live within existing and built city infrastructures. So to enable multimodal networks and make them as efficient as possible, and also pay special attention to last mile connectivity to make sure underserved areas are connected. These are all considerations that are recommended. If I can have my next slide, and I promise to finish there. How do we support these developments in urban transport? So ESCAP has developed a fairly comprehensive diagnostics tool that allows us to measure and diagnose the maturity and efficiency of urban public transport networks, called the Sustainable Urban Transit Indicator, or SUTI, which has already been applied to more than 30 cities, and it allows us to compare maturity of urban transit systems and develop targeted interventions for cities to see where we need to improve. We have also supported national urban transport policy frameworks to promote these integrated transit plans, and we have a special initiative for electric mobility, which is our umbrella for all countries that want to accelerate their transition to electric mobility, is currently joined by already 20 ESCAP member states. And I would like to extend a warm invitation to all member states to join this initiative, free of charge and voluntary. So I believe it can add value. You get access to knowledge and experiences in accelerating this transition. I will finish here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katrin. Thank you for highlighting the holistic approach required for addressing the urban transport if we are acting towards the low carbon development. And as I mentioned, that we had huge interest from the audience in person as well as for the online participants for this event, and there were more than 220 registrations in total, considering online and in person. We also have the experts present in the room who are there to highlight the interventions which they are making within their own domain. And I'll now give floor to Mr. Sanjeet Rodriguez. He can highlight the interventions he's making within his city. He's a managing director of Smart Cities Mission at Panaji, India. And Panaji is one of the, it gives me proud to mention that Panaji is one of the city which is zero waste city in India now. All of the waste, they are managing it very well. So welcome, Mr. Sanjeet, for your interventions. Maybe you can use the mic at the table.
Thank you very much. I represent Panaji in Goa, and we are an urban act city. A couple of points I would like to bring a city level perspective to the discussion here, which is very much action oriented, and I think the city level perspective needs to start with the language we talk to the city. So in Urban Act, when there was a host of proposals before the city, GIZ and the ministry and everyone, they put a host of proposals. I think the first thing we did was we thought that we are a small city and we need to bite what we can chew. It's too much of jargon, too much of aspects which is thrust on a city, and we do not have that capacity. So our first thing was to connect with one problem, and we chose flood mitigation. We are a coastal sea level city, and it is a huge threat to us. We have mapped our sea level rise. So we chose flood mitigation. But how do we translate and get this one act passed by our mayor, by the councillors? And when we talk about a huge word like flood water mitigation for resilient climate future for Panjim, I mean, it's such a huge thing that the mayor and the councillors would say, what is this? So when we translate it and we say to our elected body that yes, we will see our city not flooding and break it down to a very base level, there is acceptability. So there is a connect at this level at one end, whereas we connect from the other end to get this buy-in. And I think this local buy-in is very important, and you should work towards this buy-in. So we have a very good project with Urban Act where we are mapping our floodwater drains, which are age-old. And we had a 100-year event this year. We had rainfall which was not measured. The intensity was heaviest in 100 years, and we could easily translate this to our elected body. So we're getting a good report done, and I think that Urban Act project would be well received. As far as transport is concerned, again, a city level action under Smart Cities mission, we chose to do a bus metro. Everyone talks about a metro. Everyone talks about, we are a small city. We have no road space, even for a BRT. So we convinced our people that we would have a bus metro, and we would have interchanges for buses. We would have, and at a very low scale intervention, but we got 50 buses from the Smart Cities mission run by the Government of India. We deployed them. It's just 3 months that we have deployed 50 buses. Of course, I can calculate and show you how much GHGs have dropped. And being a tourist city, how much it is used. Ridership is increasing by 50% month on month for the last 3 months. It shows the vacuum which was there, and a good translation of these concepts at a city level has brought about this change, brought about this appetite for future change. And I think this is very important, that we translate, we act as translators between the city and ESCAP, Urban Act, and all these national level and international level action which is taking place. So I stop here. I think city level action is the fruit which we need to see of all the work we do. And I think we need to connect with the proper language, with proper approach, and see that implementation happens at the city. City is our building block. Let's not forget that. And thank you for the support you give to the cities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Indeed, local actions are very important, and cities can learn from each other. Panaji can be one of the best examples in that case. And while we are talking about the collaboration in the horizontal domain, academia cannot be left behind, and it is very important to have the views from academia, and Thammasat University is one of our knowledge partner in the Urban Act project. So here I would like to invite Professor Anne for her interventions on the topic.
Thank you, Ashita, and thank you, organizers. For Phuket, it's one of the 3 pilot cities in Thailand where I implement Urban Act project. And I think there are 3 key points that I would like to reflect from the panelist discussion as well. The first point is the approach that we work in Phuket is very much linked to what Michael was saying. He left. Michael was saying about cities is also a problem and also solutions. And we use the infrastructure deficit as a current problems, like not enough road, public transportation like that, and also linked to the long-term national strategy like NDC, the target that Kanchin was saying, and also a long-term national adaptation plan. So we try to link that. So the second point, that how we link these long-term and short-term targets, we target into 3 problems that are also localized in Phuket. The first one is the traffic jams. Of course, Thailand is unfortunately popular for that. And the second point is the greenhouse gas emissions. And in the case of Phuket, it's very private car driven. So we try to shift energy from fossil fuel to EVs, looking predominantly for private private cars, but not ignoring public transportation, because that also a major mode for, normal larger resident as well. And the last point is the transport adaptation. We look at floods. So we look at the street or road that, locate on the floodplain area. So in doing this, how these three link, the point is you have to make a dialogue with local partners or national partner, right? That we encourage them to work together. It's linked in a way that we look at the hotspot where the road, have all these problems like traffic jams, because of high number of cars, and also, poor drainage system, and also located in floodplain area. So in the case that if they're flooding, of course, there will be like longer traffic jam, and some cars have to do detour, and that also contribute to the higher greenhouse gas emissions. So we use that as a local dialogue to engage partners. Because of these, I think I come to my last point that we also have dialogue with political partners as well at a national level. They want measures, right? They don't want just like Phuket, but also how can we learn from Phuket to implement to other cities. So we think that we would like to design three main measures. The planning measure is very important. If we can do all these three linkage problem, it's going to factor in the transportation plan to address the critical road that, they need to have a specific design, and it should be working during the time of crisis. And the second point is the utility plans, where if you shift the private car to EVs, of course, you need more electricity, and Phuket land is super expensive. So you need to think about that, how we can provide enough electricity for NDC target. And the engineering measure is the specific design in terms of drainage system under that specific road. It's very important. And the last part, we would like to also have social measure because vulnerable residents locate on a low-lying plain, and they really need to have access during the time of crisis. So if we can design that also benefit to low-income people along that street, I think we can create co-benefit. So I think that's how we want to achieve in Phuket. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ann. Indeed, we need local dialogues, and with this I think there was a lot of fruitful discussion here. There would be so many questions in your mind, and so many would have been answered. Maybe we can take just one or two questions from the room, and for the online participants, I can see that you're posting questions here. We will try to reply your questions through the email post this webinar, considering the time constraints. And if there is one or two questions in the room, we can have them just very quickly. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you. I'm from FAO. I'm Ilyas. No, it is nothing to do with the FAO's mandate. I'm just asking a question on the transport. We talk a lot about behavioral changes, right? And we have now, especially after COVID, we have learned that there are new ways of working, about flexible hours or teleworking, and I didn't see that as a kind of a discussion coming through. Of course, we have the technologies coming up, because it's also something, if we change the mindset, the way we work, the way we approach, a lot of issues like in the transport can be avoided, right? I just wanted to hear the perspectives on that. Over.
Thank you very much for the question. You're absolutely right. So when we talk about transport decarbonization, we normally look at three things, which is avoid, shift, and improve, right? So the avoid is obviously very impactful, right? And if we are able, due to changing working habits, have more working from home, we try to avoid pressure on public transport systems or individualized transport. That is fantastic, right? However, coming out of the pandemic, in most cities in the region, when you talk to the public transit operators, you see that their ridership has bounced back after the pandemic and has almost reached, not quite, but has almost reached pre-pandemic levels. We're at somewhere in the ballpark of 85 to 95%, which is good for the operators because they rely on the fare box revenues But if that traffic volume bounces back to individual fossil fuel traffic, we're none the wiser, right? So the avoid angle is important, but for the traffic that we cannot avoid, of course, we want to go to shift and improve.
Thank you, Katrin. Yes, so please.
So one of the my city's learning in the question of mindset change is, I think, the biggest investment in mindset change is to get that approach bottom up too. It's just not top down. That is one. And two, the greatest investment in mindset change is time. And we need to devote and allow this time to get this change. My city is a landfill-free city. It has voted not to have a landfill, and we dispose all our waste through recycling, RDF, and whatever. It took us 20 years to make this mindset change. 20 years. We changed our school curriculum in standard 1 to standard 4, and not in the university. And everyone studies this segregation into 16 different fractions and standard 1. It took us 20 years, but that is the time we invested in mindset change. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the indulgence. Just wanted to, very happy to hear so much about behavioral change and mindset change, because I believe that our Prime Minister, when he launched the Mission Life, it focuses on behavioral change at global levels, not just about how we consume goods, but also the services here. Case in point is transportation. Happy to see buy-in, and going forward, we would like to see more and more buy-in on that. Another initiative was plant a tree in the name of your mother. Which is a very emotional appeal for greener spaces, which is low cost, which starts with the individual. So it's a very individual appeal. And again, more awareness and more buy-in on that would be probably take us quite far in our goal. Just wanted to emphasize that. The third point that you highlighted was the issue of labor market. What you highlighted is very valid. What we also face a lot in India is that when people lose their livelihood because there is a greener option available, say for example in construction industry, the way construction has to change to actually become more greener, what do we do with the people? India almost has 60 million workers who derive their livelihood from so reskilling and upskilling is absolutely critical. Otherwise the political will go away, and we will lose momentum on across sectors. So just to emphasize that, and sorry to take too much time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for highlighting these important points. Indeed, getting the behavioral change is very important, and primary education linking to the emotional needs definitely set up the pace. I think maybe just one last question.
Well, it's to Mr. Amri. You did mention about, we all know that there are many challenges, as you pointed out, in terms of financial resources, geographical challenges, lack of capacity to adopt, for example, green technologies and all. But at the same time, there are, in fact, initiatives that could be taken by governments, by countries, which may not require resources. So when I say this, the bigger countries polluting and making a lot of emissions, and the smaller countries don't have any options, but since pollution has no boundaries, and to achieve especially carbon neutral, or to reduce carbon emission, how can we as governments or as neutral bodies like ESCAP influence bigger nations in terms of containing emission? So when I say this, there are emissions which may not require a lot of resources. For example, crop burning is one of the biggest challenges in the region, and the pollution just in fact takes away the clean environment of small and beautiful countries. So how can neutral agencies like the UN organizations continue to influence governments to change their now behaviors.
Before we go to the experts, sir, please maybe you introduce yourself. This is the delegation from Bhutan.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have brief introduction.
Well, I represent the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport in Bhutan.
The air pollution aspect, actually, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, we have done a lot of work on the air pollution aspects. Now we have recently launched the National Clean Air Program. That is not only at the national level, it is also at the subnational and local levels. And we are forming action plans, and we are working in the mission mode method. And even in the developed cities like Delhi, Kanpur, Lucknow, we are also going for the pollution drive. We are monitoring the pollution on daily basis in the CPCB portal, Control of Pollution Board portal. But despite that, a lot more needs to be done. Even also the stubble burning also we are trying to protect. We have devised rules and regulations to control the stubble burning. But the only thing is that we need a lot of collaboration from the different countries, from at the national level, global level, and that's what we aspire to do it. Otherwise, this is not going to be achieved. Though fund may not be a constraint initially for small projects, but at a later stage, when you go for the collaboration, we may need funds, and which will not only come from government, it will come from various sectors of the economy at the national and global level, maybe private sectors and other sectors. That is my viewpoint.
Thank you for the wonderful discussion. And before I hand over the floor for the closing remarks to Vibhor, I would like to thank all the panelists present here. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights. And special thanks to Government of India for co-hosting this event with us. And a very special thanks to all the participants who have joined us in the room and through online. Vibhor, the floor is yours. And after this, we will have a group photo with all the panelists here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ashita. My name is Vibhor Sood. I work as a technical advisor for GIZ Urban Act project in New Delhi. I've been interested to do this closing remark. Until yesterday, I was thinking that it's an easy job. But after looking at the enlightening presentations and the thought-provoking expert remarks, I'll try to do justice with the task at hand. First of all, thank you to the organizers, Government of India and ESCAP for syncing in the Urban Act project webinar series on climate conscious cities with and organizing this special session alongside the CED 8. As the title goes, Action for Low Carbon Cities and New Paradigm for Energy Efficiency, Transport, and Urban Infrastructure Planning. So these are the three thematic core focus areas where Urban Act project is working across 5 countries and in more than 10 cities. Madam Chair, esteemed panelists and the experts present here in the room and joined online, it gives me immense pleasure to say that GIZ, being a very active and prominent partners in Government of India's urban climate change discourse, we are supporting the interventions like revisiting of the National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, development of the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, conducting or developing multinational and local level climate alliance partnerships in India, and with UNESCAP, we will also develop few capacity building targeted modules for the 5 countries. I would like to thank Madam Tripathi, DPR to UNESCAP. Madam highlighted the significant tangible benefits of low carbon cities in addition to meeting the climate commitments. Madam highlighted the importance of National Mission on Sustainable Habitat and how it can implement and localize the SDGs and NDCs. I would also like to thank the 2 directors from Indian Ministries of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and also from Mahua. Mr. Das provided us a brief glimpse of various missions of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which are kind of contributing to mitigation and adaptation strategies of various government of India's mission and implementing SDGs at the local level. Mr. Sarangi briefly touched upon the long-term low-emission development strategies, wherein he explained about the 3 approaches of implementing the lifestyle mission of environment and various alliances and partnerships that has been created for development of green infrastructure and infrastructure development. Mr. Bakhtiar, Director for Center for IMT GT, Sub-Regional Cooperation, provided a glimpse of institutional setup for low carbon development strategies across various domains, and the ideas of 42 green cities action plan and initiatives was really a key takeaway for us. And guiding development framework for sustainable and resilient subnational sub-regions and the glimpses of challenges and the collaborative solution for IMT GT cities were very informative. The section heads of ESCAP, Madam Catherine and Michael, presented the initiatives on the transport and energy efficiency domains, and Madam Catherine also talked about the pathways for sustainable development and the nexus of transport and importance of energy and urban planning, energy, transport and urban planning. Mr. Rodrigues informed about the intervention they have taken in the city of Panaji and also highlighted the importance of multi-level partnerships, and also highlighted the importance of citizen leveling involvement in the cities and doing a direct dialogue with them and upscaling the learnings and inputs from the cities in the planning instruments which are available at the national, subnational level. And at last, I would like to thank Dr. Ashita for moderating the session and keeping the time in check. And with these words from on behalf of Urban Act Project, I thank you all for attending this session, and we look forward for more meaningful dialogue and future partnerships in future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vibhor.